In this video, we're going to talk about embroidery for the home. I'm going to give you some ideas on using vintage textiles, creating new stitch projects, and revamping things that you might already have. I'll start with things that we can frame and put on the walls. Here we have two vintage textiles. The first is a cross-stitch Home Sweet Home. Framed in a nice bright frame, it will look very, very striking. But what about creating your own? This is a vintage pillowcase. It's already come pre-stitched and it cost a couple of dollars. But by using an embroidery hoop, I've been able to map out where I'd like to stitch my saying, and I've worked it in a cotton floss in a chain stitch. I can then cut this out, I can put it tight in the hoop and use the hoop as the frame itself. With a little ribbon on top, you can hang it up. Vintage textiles are great. A lot of them are really highly decorated with embroidery. This is another vintage pillowcase which is rather worn. I happen to have a frame that fits it rather nicely, and it gives me space to write something and stitch a saying here. Then I can wrap it around board and fit it into the frame and hang that up. So you may have textiles that mean something to you and you're wondering what to do with them. This was a handkerchief of my grandmother's that was very damaged, so I've cut it up and I've used the bit that was still good, added some blue stitching and put it into this sweet little frame. It sits in a collage of pictures that hang on the wall here, as you can see, alongside some other pieces that I've collected, or like this little purse that I don't use but was given to me by my mother, and it can make a really lovely display in a room. Other items that you can frame are like this really sweet little sampler with the ABCs and 1, 2, 3. I've put it up in my children's playroom so that they can learn their alphabet. Embroidery hoops create really good frames and you can do a lot with them. Framing just a simple embroidery, or you can play with them in other ways. Wrapping yarn, ribbon and different threads. You can make a decoration and hang them all from a single pole like this. One holiday season I wrapped hoops with lace and I had snowflakes hanging from the ceiling. Maybe you're a needle pointer or you like cross stitch or counted stitch. And so you can create with a good strong canvas a little photo frame. You can also buy the stands for them in packs, so you don't have to go making a stand, you can self-stick one on. Also available in many needlepoint stores, you can buy frames that you can then work a piece into. So here we have a mirror, and this just sits nicely in the mirror. This is a piece that we teach at the school, and you can use that. There are also very practical items you can get as well. Things like this shaker style coat rack. You can get clocks, bookends, down to smaller things that you can create as gifts for people, like this paperweight. And there I've just monogrammed a K. Cushions are very easy and they can be really fun to create for any room. This one is made out of a tea towel linen, and I added some ribbons, again for the playroom. And then I've taken some pillowcases or cushion cases that are no longer in use in the room that they were intended for, and I've spruced them up for my children's room. So making them fun, I've in here polka dots with Appleton, and I did a turkey rug stitch to make those nice and fun. We have cross stitches here, and then this one, using my vintage buttons, the brightest and fun shapes that I could find, I covered this pillow which had was a crate and barrel pillowcase that I found in the sale, and made that a lot of fun. Other ideas, you can actually work on plain pillows with just different types of stitches. It can be really fun. You can do that with your children. And then making pillows out of vintage linens. So these two sweet little ones are for my daughter's doll's carriage, and I made them out of little collected linens that I had. Something like this tea towel, for instance. Just by turning it in the other way. I machined, left a little opening, turned it through, and then stuffed it with a padding. And then I have this sweater, a really nice cozy sweater that I had and I loved for years and years and years, but the elbows had gone, the cuffs had gone, and so I turned what was remaining of it into a pillow and used a vintage binding to put an edging onto it. But things like tablecloths that may have become rather badly marked, these are great for cutting up and using to cover things like footstools or creating different embroideries for the home. Curtains. You can do things that are very simple, like hemming and edging a curtain with something as simple as a running stitch. You can use found objects like this trim that we have here, vintage rickracks going up or down in size, and then I have these felted baubles that I've added on there. And here's a lovely idea for a sheer curtain. You can take handkerchiefs, piece them together and create beautiful sheer hangings. This one's just pinned together to show you in the video. But another idea is if you have a clear plastic for a shower curtain, you could have this as the front of the shower curtain and the plastic to protect them. Also using vintage curtains, these were some William Morris ones that I have had for a long time. You can add stitches to them to create a lot of texture and detail and just bring them to life a little more. Handkerchiefs are fantastic for playing with. It's a shame to cut them up, but you can make and create wonderful things out of them. I'm about to show you something I've made for my daughter, but these were the remnants from the item that I made. And what I've done here is just added and layered up the different handkerchiefs here, and then with them you can just baste them across the top, add a trim if you like, and that would make a lovely valance for a window or an edging to a shelf or something like that, so nothing goes to waste. The project I made for my daughter was alphabet bunting. So I collected as many alphabet monogrammed handkerchiefs as I could find, and I created this bunting. Just simply cut the handkerchiefs. I used the back and the front here, just machined down, and then with a vintage trim across the top there, and I've gone through the alphabet. Some of them were a lot harder to find than others, so in that case I've stitched a letter to the pieces, matching them to the designs that were already on there. That was a lot of fun to do. And bunting's very popular, so you can create your own. This is a little white work bunting with eyelets and a buttonhole edge. Pretty again to hang in on the top of a window where the light can shine through. You can decorate for a wedding, something like that. And then something I've done using my kids' damaged clothing. This was a t-shirt, came from England, and with stains all around the top. I've cut it up and I made fun bunting for their playroom, which I've just added little baubles to the end to make them fun. Trims are really great to play with. Many vintage ones, again, quite easy to get hold of and relatively affordable. So here we have something you can do for your guest towels or bathroom. Here I have a trim that I found, and I've run a satin ribbon through, and then I can just trim an old towel and give that a new lease of life. Another idea, if you're using your handkerchiefs and you have cuts left over, you can monogram your towels without too much hassle. So what I've done here is I've cut and I can just baste this down. I could add a ribbon to match that yellow, and you can personalize your towels. Another thing you can do is create little embroidered swatches and then stitch those down onto your towel. So here we have a row of ducklings on a linen, and then I can make a band and I can stitch that along the towel as well. A lot of fun. Also, something we can do with edgings, I have a piece of linen here where the edging is coming away. I can use the linen for another project, but this trim is rather nice to edge shelving in your pantry or maybe in a closet. Again, laces can go to good use for things like that and look very attractive. Something else you can do with the offcut of your handkerchiefs. This is a Perspex little kit for a light switch plate. It comes with a Ada fabric that you can stitch onto, but you can also fill with other finds that you might have and create attractive plates for your rooms. Doilies. Well, we can have a lot of fun with doilies. Here's one that I have just monogrammed with an E. I have put into a frame and then attached a ribbon so it can hang. But you can also do things like piecing the doilies together to create a curtain effect like we showed you with the handkerchiefs. You can paint your doilies and then print with them. So for instance, we have a crocheted one here, painted and just printed on a fabric. So if you have a curtain or something you would like to give a little more interest to, that's very fun to play with. Not handkerchiefs, lampshades. Lampshades, we can have a lot of fun creating very interesting effects with lampshades. Here I've actually glued a trim that I found on here, but you can also stitch onto this doilies and lace trims and give a bit of a chic look too. Or you can go a little simpler and create a darning stitch around and create a pattern by stitching through. It's helpful to make a hole first and then take your needle down through that hole rather than just trying to stitch directly into the shade. Here we have an idea with using old tapestries and needle points. This one came out of a fire screen. You can see the shape at the top of the fire screen there. But if you collect old pieces like this, you can then reupholster a footstool or an ottoman and actually patchwork looks rather fun with this piece here. Also with needlepoint, this is another project I did for my children. I took a picture of an illustration that I rather liked, and I've stitched it onto a little seat chair cover here. Tablecloths. You can add to existing tablecloths, or if you have beautiful plain ones and you want to add a little bit of colour, this is a rather pretty, just very simple one where we've got a running stitch and a little cluster of French knots to add a bit of detail to a tablecloth. But also you can paint and then just add a minimal amount of stitching. This is actually a vintage cloth that I came across. The little birds have been painted on with a watercolour paint and the stitches, and then we have this lovely fringing as well. And lastly, bed covers. So quilting, you might choose to create a quilt to begin with using clothing, blouses, little pinny dresses of a child that you want to have memories of, the dresses that were worn, so you can piece them together and create a quilt. And you can embroider on top and crazy patchwork on a quilt. And then other coverings like bed linen and throws. Again, just using very simple stitches to run a pattern through, darning stitches, little triangles and a running stitch here can really bring something to life. So they're just a handful of ideas that we have that you can use for decorating your home. And there's a lot of fun to be had with thinking about this, playing with things. And so I hope you have fun with doing so as well. If you would like to ask any questions, please email us at info@sfsnad.org and we'll be happy to help you out.